where a domestic violence case was put up in the courts and was disputed whether the Defense of Marriage Act there was going to affect it. Eventually it went to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said, no, that does not affect, the Defense of Marriage Act does not affect domestic violence and can be prosecuted as said. And so it was vindicated that this marriage amendment affects marriage, and it doesn't affect these other areas which people are rightly concerned about. When we were formulating this law, this bill, to put this amendment before the people, we looked at all the different states and we tried to craft a very, very strategic law that would address exactly what we're trying to do and not have negative side effects in other areas. You constantly hear about the beginning of the amendment. It talks about marriage being between one man and one woman. The second part, which is a very important part of the amendment, talks about contracts between private individuals. We didn't want, whether it be inheritance rights or hospital visitations or an employer to give benefits to whomever they choose. We said those are private contracts and those need to be upheld because that's part of our free society. People should have the ability to have contracts or relationships with who they want, and that is going to be afforded, and we've specifically told the courts they are not allowed to interfere in those things because that is not the scope of what we're trying to do here. When one of the philosophies in government, which I think is important, because as I talk to people of all walks of life about this issue, people that agree with me, people that disagree with me, a group would come up and say, are you expanding the size of government? And that was a concern because that goes against, I think, philosophically the direction we need to go. We need to have a limited, smaller, more effective and efficient government. And I looked at this, and as I was thinking through it, I thought, when I sat on the Senate floor, Senator Dan Suchek was one of 50 people who was allowed by law to vote on this bill, to put it before the people. And what we've done now is citizen Dan Suchek is one of more than 6 million voters who decides to put this before and whether it be amended to the Constitution. I like taking the power from Raleigh and putting it in the hands of people there. And there are lots of issues the legislature is designed to handle. This is an issue that we started with the preamble, says we the people. And there are complicated budget issues and all different things that the legislature is in place for. But doesn't the family of North Carolina, aren't they eminently qualified to decide this issue? Don't they live this? Doesn't everyone in the community live in this scenario where they can decide what they want the definition of marriage to be? And that's why I really think it's important, and that's why I pushed to have the people of North Carolina be able to decide and vote on this important issue. And finally, I'll thank the people who organized this event, because when you stand up for an issue, especially one that tends to be contentious, you're going to get people who sometimes disagree with you. That's good. Sometimes insult you and threaten you. That's bad, but it's part of the reality of the world we live in when there's contentious issues. So I want to thank pastors and leaders in the community who have put themselves forward on this, who will take some degree of abuse for it because they believe it's the right thing. And I'll end with, this has been passed in 30 states in one form or another. It didn't pass the first time in every state. And when I've looked at the reasons why it didn't pass because people were complacent. Because people said, this is common sense. Of course we're going to vote for this. And they didn't get out, they didn't talk to their neighbors, they didn't get out to vote. And it was beaten early on in a couple states. Well, I'm encouraged here that we have events all over so that people are informed, that people are notified as to what's going on, when the vote's going to happen. And if you get out and you talk to your friends, your family, your neighbors, and you encourage them to get out and vote, I am confident that this will pass as it has in 30 other states.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
I appreciate the opportunity. I voted for this in the House because I felt like it was the right thing to do, to define marriage in our Constitution. A constitutional provision is more difficult to overturn than a statute. And as you've already heard from Senator Suchek, there are already court cases opposing the law that's in place. So the argument that we don't need a constitutional amendment because it's in law is completely false, because we already see challenges. As an attorney who practices here in the high country, with a lot of my business being in estate planning and healthcare powers of attorney and wills, there were a number of legal arguments that are being thrown around by the opponents of this amendment, and I just wanted to give you some of the facts so that you know that these are false arguments. One of the things that I've heard a lot is that it will affect our economy. Large companies will not move here that have these diverse social policies. Completely false. 2011 study over the last 10 years, 1999 to 2009, took a look at states and ranked them by economic performance and economic outlook. 8 of the top 10 economically performing states have marriage amendments in their constitutions. 9 of the 10 states forecasted to have the poorest economic climate have legalized same-sex marriage, civil unions, or domestic partnerships. So the correlation that the opponents use for economic interests is completely false. I've also heard about the domestic violence law. Senator Suchek already talked about that. That argument comes from some appellate court cases in Ohio that the Supreme Court of Ohio overturned and said our marriage amendment and our domestic violence statutes are exactly parallel or in line. There is no conflict whatsoever. You've heard that medical powers of attorney, wills and trusts, all of these can be overturned under this statute. Absolutely false. Medical powers of attorney, healthcare powers of attorney is what we usually call them in North Carolina, are signed by individuals, and they can choose whoever they would like to for their healthcare agent. The definition of marriage in the Constitution has nothing to do with who can be a healthcare agent for someone. Healthcare powers of attorney that are in place now, there will be no impact whatsoever of this amendment on that law. And finally, there's also been, you've heard about custody and visitation rights of unmarried parents and all kinds of things about child custody. Absolutely false. This amendment defines marriage, and as anyone who knows anything about the law knows that custody rights and children and visitation have to do with the parent-child relationship and nothing at all to do with the relationship between the parents themselves. So again, a definition of marriage in our Constitution is not going to affect that law. And I just want you to have the facts out there. These arguments are fallacious, and they need to be ignored, and they need to be counteracted. So if you have questions, I'll be around for a few minutes afterwards. I appreciate the opportunity to be here tonight, and I appreciate your support, and I support this amendment as well as one of the House co-sponsors. I had many sponsors, including, in order for it to pass in the General Assembly, members of both parties had to vote for it in order for it to pass, to come for now a vote of the people, which is where it should be. Thank you.
Vic Vitora about
From?
Brad Shields from Boone.
Okay. And what were your thoughts on the rally?
I thought the rally was very informative. Dan Suchek and Jonathan Jordan gave us the facts behind what the amendment was about, and gleaned good information out of it. I'm in full support of the amendment, and thought the rally was good, well attended.
And can you just say why you're for it, or?
Well, I'm a Christian. Feel like God's law is over everything, and marriage should be between a man and a woman.
Thank you. And where are you from?
I'm actually from Miami, but I live in Vilas.
And so what were your thoughts on this meeting?
I'm sorry, but you know, they might be not. It might not be a racial situation now. Now it's homosexuality, and hatred is hatred. Bigotry is bigotry. That's all it is. I mean, that's the way I feel. I know a lot of people who are gay, and it doesn't affect me anyway, you know? It's like, you know, I'd be against gay marriage if I was going to get forced into one, but I'm not. I don't have to get a gay marriage, so why do I care? Really? You know, I mean, like the guy said in there, all that stuff about, oh, well, this is something important because of this and that, you know, it trumps all the jobs and everything else. No, it doesn't. I've been out of work for 4 years. I was a carpenter for 10. And in that business, in the carpentry business, I have nothing. I have no pension, no anything. I'm a subcontractor, I get nothing. It's a right to work state. That's another issue, right to work states. At will work states. That means they can fire you whenever they want, no reason at all. It's just the same thing. It's always the same contradictory thing. They put something on a sign and you think that it's for that, but really it's against it. And I just think it's about time we all got together and stopped listening to certain peoples because they're just preaching the same old hatred.